Greetings. We're so glad you joined us today, and we're going to get started in just a moment with our webinar on rural and small town disaster relief. And we are so glad to have Pastor Jim Daub with us today from Havelock, North Carolina, where it's a sunny 80 degrees today, as opposed to Madison, Nebraska, where it is a balmy 1. And so we're at two ends of the spectrum, but some great information that Pastor has for us today, and we'll get rolling in just a moment. But if you have any questions during our webinar, please type those in the chat feature found on the left side of your computer screen, or up in the chat feature on the top bar at the top of the screen there, and we'll get to those. We'll do a little Q&A at the end, we look forward to hearing what Pastor has to tell us. So let's begin with a word of prayer. Gracious Lord, we give you thanks that in so many and various ways we can serve you and your church, that we can bring the good news of the kingdom of Christ to so many. And in one of the ways which we wish we didn't have to deal with, but we know in this sin-fallen world it is our reality that we have to deal with folks in the face of disaster. But we give you thanks that we have the opportunity, even in disaster, and sometimes especially in disaster, that we can share your good news in word and in deed with those who are affected. Lord, we give you thanks for Pastor and the work that he has done there in North Carolina, and we pray your blessing be upon our webinar today. It's in the name of Christ that we pray. Amen. Pastor, take it away.
All righty. Thank you very much. It is a privilege and joy to come to you. As Pastor said, I am Pastor Jim Daub. I'm at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Havelock, North Carolina. And it is a balmy 80 degrees and sunny, but we're supposed to have a cold front coming through. To give you just kind of a little bit of history of who I am, I graduated Concordia Seminary in St. Louis in 1999, and February the 3rd of this year, I celebrated my 18th year of being the pastor here at St. Paul. And in our 63-year history, I'm the longest tenured pastor here. So it's been a privilege and a joy so far to serve my church for over 20 years as an ordained pastor, and here at St. Paul for just 18 of it so far. So since I've been here in Havelock, I've had the great joy, I guess you could say, of weathering numerous tropical storms, but 6 named hurricanes. But nothing was at all like Hurricane Florence. At the time when Hurricane Florence was preparing to come our way, I was serving as the chaplain for the police and the fire department for our city of Havelock. I've now transitioned from chaplain work with the city to now being one of our auxiliary clergy support for the United States Coast Guard. So I've made that transition over. But come the September the 11th is a very big day for the police and fire communities, and that day we were having our annual remembrance of 9/11, and it was Hurricane Florence was beginning to really rush towards us. On the slide that is there on the bottom right corner is a picture of a piece of steel that is actually from the Twin Towers that is there, and then we have in the background is a rainbow. So as I was giving my presentation, the great joy was and if you look closely on the picture, it's actually a double rainbow. The double rainbow showed up in there. And so many people said, oh, this is a great sign that everything is going to be good. Well, our community, it wasn't always, wasn't completely very good for us afterward. On this slide here is a picture of the track for Hurricane Florence. Even as quickly as on September the 11th, Hurricane Florence was still planning on coming in at approximately a category 4 hurricane. And if you're not exactly sure where Havelock is the little yellow dot that is there on the picture. And what I'll be doing is throughout our presentation today is trying to share with you the story, but then also the response through picture as well as through speech in there. So one of the things that for those, I was born and raised in Milwaukee. I knew nothing about hurricanes except for like when Hurricane Andrew decimated South Florida and several things like that. I never understood the anatomy of what a hurricane was. If you take a hurricane and you basically make a circle out of it and you cut it into fours, the eye of the hurricane being the exact center of that circle, and then depending on which quadrant of the circle you are on. The worst part of the quadrant for a hurricane is to be the upper right quadrant. That's the most powerful of the storm because it's catching all of the energy as it comes forward, as it spins. Kind of the best, if you will, the best quadrant is the bottom third into to the right, the bottom right. So bottom left into bottom right is about the best place to be because that's where kind of the storm is at the weakest. So if you notice, the big little red circle with the two fins on either side is the hurricane symbol with the number 4. That's the category of what it was to come in at. And Havelock would be right on the upper right quadrant of that storm. So she was planning on, they were predicting her to be one of the strongest storms to have hit our coastal area in a very, very long time. So much so that it was to a bottom 4 to a high category 5 storm. And I think a category 5 storm is approximate sustained winds of 125, 130 miles an hour and above. What they had done, though, is on the 12th into the 13th of, or 11th into the 12th, and then into the 12th, 13th, they started downgrading the storm. And so she went from a very powerful category 4-5 to a low category 2, high category 1 storm just a day later. And so everyone says, hey, that sounds great, but that was probably the worst thing they could have done for our community. Because the fact that a lot of people who had been doing great diligence for us of planning and getting supplies and things like that, when they heard, oh, it's only going to be a category 1, we've weathered those before, we're not going to make any plans, and so they just stopped preparing. They disregarded all of any plans that they were, future plans that they needed to get done, and they pretty much just rested on their laurels with that. So the evening of the morning of the 13th, Thursday, September 13 of 2018, is when Hurricane Florence started. You start feeling the outer bands. It's kind of like there's fingers of a storm that start reaching out before the actual storm comes. So that morning on the 13th, we started getting the first sets of the outer bands, and everyone's like, oh, this is nothing much, don't worry about it, everything is great. And then about 5 o'clock that evening is when the sidewall of the leading edge of the storm was starting to hit us. It doesn't sound like, 5 o'clock, that's not so bad. But as you start going through the storm through the night is when it's probably the most scariest because you don't see anything. So from about 5 o'clock p.m. on the 13th of September through about 11 o'clock p.m. on the 14th of September, we had major force, hurricane force winds directly over us. The brunt of the storm came in on Friday the 14th. So we had around just over 24 hours of hurricane force winds that were above our house. Now, had Hurricane Florence come in at a 4, she would have been in and out and gone. But because she came in slower, much slower, she ended up staying. She was kind of like the house guest that comes and just never wants to leave. What we had received as of the 15th of September, again, remember the 13th of September, the rain started. The 15th of September, we had received 24 inches of rain just in my city alone. The city to the north of me, New Bern, North Carolina, which sits right on kind of the point of two rivers, they had over 30 inches of rain. Now, that doesn't count any of the flooding, any of the wind surge, any of the rains or anything else. It's just how many raw inches of rain was over in our area. Now, our city here at Havelock, we sit 23 feet above flood stage. And we were getting around 19 feet above sea level storm surge. So you notice there's only a few feet difference between where we sat above sea level and where the storm surge being that as the winds are coming in from the ocean, it's pushing the waters up the river. And so all the waters going up the river, because there's so much rain coming down the river, soon they just all start colliding, and then all the water just spreads out into the community. So we not only had all of in Havelock, not just 24 inches of rain, but we also went through 2 high tide cycles. So you're adding all that extra water and all that extra rain and all that extra wind, and then pushing the water up, and then the water's ending up coming back down, and it was just pretty much a mess. They were saying that last count is we were between 17 to 22 billion dollars of property destruction damage in our community, in our county alone. Now, there are still people who are being going through the recovery process. A pastor friend of mine, 2 churches down, they have not had service in their church since the Sunday before Hurricane Florence came. Their church has been completely flooded out, and they have yet to be able to kind of rebuild because of insurance issues, and they're a much smaller congregation, older congregation, and just don't have a lot of resources and things. My wife has the joy of being able to run the 911 center here in town. And so I had her prepare for me just kind of some differences between the calls for service. Like, on a regular, in 2017, how many calls for service, meaning police, fire, EMS calls came into the center, and then how did that compare for 2018? And so in 2017, there was 420 calls for service, and 719 or 71 of those were 911 calls, and 349 of those were administrative calls. So, calling to find out about, a traffic ticket or something like that. In 2018, we had 896 calls between the dates of September 13th and 15th. So we more than doubled how many calls of service we had. And of that, we had 104 were 911 calls and 792 were administrative. We had the issue that for a while, our 911 lines went down because of the wind, the rain, and loss of, though we have generator backups and things like that, just the amount of how many power poles and how many things came down, we were able to run some backup lines, but they came over the administrative lines as opposed to just straight through on the 911 lines. In terms of from the 13th of September through October the 3rd, they had 2,514 or 15 calls for service. And then in 2018, they had 4,462 calls for service. Again, double the amount of calls for service because of those situations. A lot of it that they received calls for service in there is because people didn't continue preparing. Again, they rested on their laurels. They said it's only a Category 1 storm. We don't have to worry about it. Everything's fine. And so they didn't think about getting all the supplies that they needed. And then next thing you knew, they were getting stuck. We did up in New Bern had several deaths because people, as the water started rising, they got very afraid. So they climbed into their attic. And then the attic got very hot and the water started getting close to there. And some people had, they had some saws with them. One guy had taken his chainsaw with him into his attic and to protect the chainsaw because he knew he'd need the chainsaw afterward. Well, then he got afraid because the water was starting to come in, so he cut a hole into the roof. Well, the cutting the hole into the roof created sparks, which then started the house on fire. And then because the whole area was flooded, the fire department couldn't get to them. And unfortunately, it was one of our casualties that we had. So it was just really a horrific time with that. We've been over a year now that we've been displaced. We still have dumpsters all over the community. On my street alone, I live in the parsonage behind the church. We still have all kinds of people with tarps on their house that is still there. Again, a lot of the things are being tied up with insurance. Some people didn't have proper amounts of insurance. Some people couldn't pay the deductible to make the claim, and so therefore they just are trying to save enough money in order to get things done. With that, and some people just finally gave up. They moved away, and now the house sits there tarped and vacant, and is creating a whole lot of other kind of slew of issues. So what I have now in the next few slides are just some pictures of some of the damage that is there. And if what we did receive was, we had sustained winds of over 40 miles an hour for almost 36 hours straight. And we had wind gusts that were some topped over 90 miles an hour in there here at the church and at the parsonage. We lost 3 over 100-foot oak trees in the backyard of the parsonage that separates between the church and the house. One came about probably 16, 18 inches from having gone through the kitchen. One hit our shed and kind of came off, and one missed going through the carport by about 2 feet. So in terms of damage to the house, we were very lucky. It was just some cosmetic things. We received some more substantial damage here at the church, but one person on my street, a retired teacher, and he's a retired person from a Marine, they had a tree that actually cut their house in half. So we live in, and I forgot to mention this earlier, Havelock is on the far east coast, North Carolina, 2 hours southeast of Raleigh, 2 hours northeast of Wilmington. And we are home for Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point. We are the largest air station for the Marine Corps on the East Coast. And so during that time, a lot of the Marines, they moved the planes out, and they moved a lot of the Marines out. And so if you're not active duty Marine, a lot of our community is retired Marines who they like the area, and they retired and they stayed in their families and things like that. So that's pretty much our main industry here. And so a lot of the folks that got affected are retirees. A lot of their homes got damaged, and because of being on fixed incomes and things like that, just don't have the means to fix some of those. So in these pictures, some of these pictures are ones that I have taken. Some were ones that I pulled from our fire department in there. This is one of the streets that is a cut through here in town. On the picture on the left, it shows you how the water just made a big ginormous sinkhole. So almost half of the road is just sucked in. And the picture on the right is again, there's a small little creek. During most of the year, that creek it is completely bone dry. There's hardly anything in there. And there was so much water pushing through, that road completely collapsed. We still have not gotten that road rebuilt, because now there's some battling that's going on between the state and the city and things like that. Here on the picture on the left was a common sight around us. It was a picture of a telephone pole where the entire top of the telephone pole was sheared off. The lines are still attached to the conductor things that are there, but the whole bottom of the pole is gone. And then to the right is, this is from our city park. Our city park is directly it's kind of kitty corner from where the police station is. They actually had a F1 tornado go through the city park. And this was one of the picnic sheds that had collapsed down. Ironically, there were 2 picnic sheds in there, one that was built by the city and one that was built by the Eagle Scouts. And the Eagle Scout one stood without even a kind of a move to anything, and not even a shingle off the roof. The one built by the city, well, as you can see from the picture, has completely been torn down, collapsed down. On the picture on the left is one of our homes that we did have. We had numerous structure fires here in Havelock. A lot of it came because of the fact that almost all of our power lines are overhead into the house. We have very few buried because our water table being so high. So these are examples of where the wind ripped the wires off the house, causing the sparks, and then the fires began. For the most part, we were able to get those fires out. There were a few that we couldn't quite get to because after a certain mile per hour, our fire equipment, our ambulances, and our policemen are not allowed out on the roads. There's a moratorium for them to be able to go out for their safety, and for the, you've got a big giant fire truck becomes a giant wind sail. The picture to the right is one of the strip malls in town, where you can see where the tornado came by, and it actually has ripped off the complete fascia of that building. This is the Ford dealership on the left. They tried moving all the cars to higher ground, but you can see that a whole bunch of those cars have been submerged underwater. Even for how much they tried to move them, flooding in our area was still very, very bad. The picture to the right is one of our other major arteries through this, the southern part of our city. And this area, these apartments were about 4 feet of water, standing water in the middle of the road. Again, because our water table is high, we don't sit that far above sea level, and the storm surge and the rain was just so great. To the left on this picture is a picture of one of the many trees that got blown over and fell into someone's house. We have two main kind of trees here on the coast. One is a pin oak, and one is a longleaf pine. The pine trees are the ones that do very well because unlike my home state of Wisconsin, where pine trees do not have very deep roots, but the oak trees have a very deep taproot, it's the exact opposite here. So most of the oak trees here have very fingerling roots on the surface, and the pine trees have deep taproots. So a lot of the pine trees that did break just got snapped at the top or snapped in the middle, but the bottom part was still stuck in the ground. What we lost here at the parsonage was all the oak trees because of just not having deep roots. On the right-hand side, you'll notice there's one of the National Guard trucks. We were able to mobilize the National Guard to come in and be with us. They were able to make a bunch of swiftwater rescues, not only by themselves, but also alongside our firefighters. And we had numerous people who had lived here in the city for probably 20, 30 years, who have never seen flooding like this. And so therefore they didn't plan on evacuating out. They didn't plan on leaving. They didn't plan on doing anything. And then all of a sudden they got caught because their house started to flood because the water was coming up so fast, and it was evening, and now they couldn't get their car out, and now they were stuck. And so they had to do a lot of rescues in there. Here's some examples from the fire department of just a lot of the flooding and a lot of the trees that were coming down. And this now is in the parsonage. This is one of the trees that landed in there. This kind of looks like, okay, well, that's all well and good. That root ball itself is about 19, 20 feet tall by probably around 18 or about 22 feet wide. I stand at about 6'4" tall, and I came just above where the tree is laying horizontally. My shoulders were just above that. So this was one of the huge, huge trees. This is the backside of that root ball, so it can show you just how narrow the roots actually are. And that the hole that it pulled up out of there was approximately 3.5 feet deep was there. So because for us as Missouri Synod Lutherans, we're the only Lutheran church, Missouri Synod church, within an hour either way. So if someone doesn't like this church, they head over to a church either an hour one way or the other way to get to another. So I joked with all my Baptist friends, pastor friends who came over to see the damage at the house. I said, well, look, we got a baptistry right here in the backyard for you to be able to rent, so that this way we can pay for all of the trees to come down. And so they didn't take me up on that offer for some reason. But you'll notice there on the left-hand side towards the middle of the picture is a brick walkway. It completely ripped up the brick walkway that went between my house and the church. Here's another picture of our backyard, standing on the side of the drainage ditch that is closest to the church, looking at the backyard. Where you see those light posts was the walkway that went to the parsonage. Where you see that bridge and where those boards are floating, underneath those boards is about 5.5 feet to the bottom of the drainage ditch. So that, and where those boards are about 2.5 feet above where the even line is to go from one side of the ditch to the other. Where you see all the water in the backyard, there is about 2 feet of standing water. So we had tons of water everywhere. The tree to the left is the tree that hit our shed and rolled off, and the tree to the right is the one that kind of came down right in between and just missed our carport and smashing the car. So there in the middle of the picture is actually I take that back. On the previous slide, the tree to the left is the one that almost hit the kitchen, and the tree to the right is the one that hit the shed. So now you can see it from this side, looking back. The tree to the right is the one that almost hit the kitchen. The one in the middle is the one that almost came through the carport, and the one on the left is the one that came down, hit the shed, and rolled off in there. You'll notice that in the center of the picture is our golden retriever, Heidi. She wasn't quite exactly sure what to do through everything because she and I stayed at the house. My wife was mandatorily recalled to the police department and stayed there for about 4 days in there. So Heidi and I were there at the house. And it was she was a little uncertain once daylight came and we could sorry about that. Once we could get out and look around in there. Here is another example of another picture of all the standing water that is in the backyard of the parsonage. In the center of the picture there is a tall oak tree, and to the left of that oak tree was a big giant gazebo that was had a nice fire pit underneath there, and everything was pretty much destroyed in there. This is now a picture of our front entranceway to the church. The picture on the left shows the south side of the church, the main roof, and you can see where a whole section of the shingles were just completely ripped up. And then the picture to the right is our steeple that shows the north side of the steeple. So again, the wind in that area swirled, so you got the roof taken off of both sides in there. Here now is my old office. You can see behind me I'm in a different office now. We were looking at planning on doing a building expansion before the storm, and so we just delayed any kind of remodeling of the office in there. So what had happened is my section of the office had a flat roof over it, and the way the wind was whipping around, it caught the corner of the roof and it rolled the roof backwards, and it caused the water to pour into my area and just kind of saturate the bottom right has a whole section of ceiling that collapsed down. Right underneath there was my computer and my desk chair and all my office papers. And then you'll notice in that same picture, the whole ceiling is pretty wet. I pretty much lost everything on my desk, the computer, all the office furniture. We had a conference table in there, all the stuff on the conference table. By the grace of God, one of my members needed to get to the church because their house started taking on water. And so she didn't have a key, so she went over to the police station. My wife was there. My wife gave her the key, and with a caveat as, please check pastor's office to see if everything's okay. And she said, no, pastor, water's pouring through your roof. And so we were able to move most of my books in that first day as the rain was still coming down and the water was pouring in. That wasn't already wet like furniture and such, but books and my files and things, so that I lost only maybe a Xerox paper box full of books total out of all of my books in there. Here now is the cleanup of the trees at the parsonage. We had a friend of my wife and I's that came and helped bring his big giant tractor. It has a boom weight of 5,000 pounds, and we successfully broke the boom. So it was a lot of weight that we had. Those piles of brush and debris were everywhere throughout the city. The FEMA contractors were here for months just cleaning up and then shredding and chopping up and making into mulch all of the tree stuff. If someone really wanted to make a lot of money, all the oak trees that we had taken down, someone could have probably come and brought a portable, sawmill and made a whole lot of nice board feet of pure oak. But at that point, none of us wanted to see any more down trees and any more down wood. And so everything got shredded, chipped, and then discarded from there. This is one of the neighborhoods that was in our community. You'll notice the piles of stuff in there, and they're in front of homes that are two-story homes. Again, the water went through the whole first story, and in some instances, water was creeping up into the second story. Families lost everything. Again, not because the roofs were ripped off or things like that, but because of how much rain and how the wind pushed all the rivers around. And so pictures like this were very common. We still have some folks who are still dealing, I think, with some PTSD because of just losing all of their earthly possessions and then not knowing where to go or what to do and things like that. Let's see. Here's an example of one house. This is all the insulation from underneath their house. This is all their ductwork, their insulation. This did not cover any of the items that got lost in the garage or any of the items that got lost in their living room. This is just under the house insulation. Most of our homes here are built on either concrete slab or on a crawl space. Because again, we're not able to have basements because the water table being so high. So this was a more than common sight in there. Again, to the left is one of the neighborhoods. Every house has all the stuff just there on the front. In terms of damage at our parsonage, we lost 3. The picture to the right is our shed. It's one of those kind of Mennonite built sheds, and that thing was amazing. 3 trusses got broken. It did not go out of square. They came in, they fixed the 3 trusses, they re-roofed the whole thing, and everything was still under warranty. And it was amazing the work that they did. Here's our golden retriever, Heidi. She thought that jumping on the table and going through all the plants was her regular old kind of her little playground in there. So a lot of people started asking, they said, they started going, well, what are things that we can do? What are things that we need to do? How can we help? And And this is being my first major hurricane in all these years. I didn't know exactly what to tell them. And so what we ended up doing is we started telling people, listen, it's hard to get us cash. So why not order things directly through Amazon, order through Target.com, Walmart.com, through Lowe's, site to store, those kind of things. And what was amazing for us is about 4 days after the storm left, Michael Meyer and Ross were here, and Ross Johnson, and then my district president was here, and we had a truck probably a day or so after that came as part of the orphan grain train, that while the storm was hitting us, the donation, the truck was being loaded in St. Louis. And so a third of the supplies went to us, a third of the supplies went to Calvary in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and a third of the supplies went to Messiah in Wilmington, North Carolina. And so how awesome that was for us is to know that even as we were completely being overwhelmed by the storm, our synod was looking out for us and caring for us. And the dollars that were given to help were being spent to help us, even when we didn't even know what we needed or what we needed to help. And so the disaster response, these flood buckets were absolutely amazing. If you know of any of your districts that might be able to help put some of the buckets together, these are fantastic. I was one of the presenters at the Natural Disaster Conference in St. Louis this past October, I believe, and they used these flood buckets in the Midwest after the tornadoes. They used them after the flooding. We used them here on the coast with the flooding. They used them in so many ways. There's so many great things that get put in them, and the donations for those, to be able to hand a bucket of cleaning supplies to someone who just lost everything is amazing, because at least they can have then a clean spot to sit and rest. And these four pictures are just a very small snapshot of the items that we received. On the left side, those two pictures on the left side of the screen are the supplies that came off the truck from St. Louis, as well as the far right picture is all of the stuff that came off the supplies: hand trucks, diapers, tarps, gloves, wheelbarrows, brooms, mops, things to help muck out houses. And then we had a group from Florida brought us, they brought hundreds and hundreds of buckets of the disaster response buckets, the flood buckets that were given to us. We then were also able to work very closely. I worked with the one of the county commissioners, who kept sending truckloads of stuff over to us as well. Plus, we had donations of people from around the synod that sent us, more cleaning supplies, flood buckets. We were able to receive food supplies from several organizations that we were able to kind of hand out. Our congregation has about 170 members total, and so we have a very small footprint in terms of our community, but we were one of the only churches that served as a distribution center of supplies to our entire community of around 22,000. So we had folks coming in from about 8 in the morning to about 4:30 in the afternoon every day for about 4 weeks straight. And as long as we had room to pile stuff, we kept receiving trucks in from groups to kept handing out. One of the things the synod has that was an amazing outreach tool for us is a devotional booklet about seeing God in the midst of the storm. And so that was a great outreach event, opportunity, that as we handed out much needed supplies, we also gave out those tracts and those devotional materials and provided for them. We, like I said, we received a lot of donations that came to us through Amazon.com, through Walmart.com. One day the UPS truck drove in, And the UPS driver said, "Hey, can I get a little bit of help?" And so some of my members went out to the truck, and we went there and we opened up the truck, and we said, "Okay, which boxes are ours?" And he says, "This half of the truck, a half a UPS truck, was all of our stuff." And we were opening stuff, of Lysol and baby wipes and all these kind of things. And one of the notes that was in there, it was a donation from a Hurricane Harvey survivor. And all they said is, from a Hurricane Harvey survivor, may these supplies be a blessing to you as the donations from others were blessings to us. And it was completely random. It was completely anonymous, but that touched our hearts in ways that we will never recount, because what the whole point of Synod being is that we walk together. We walk together in the good times, and we walk together in the times of struggle. And in our time of struggle, we had donations that came in from around the Synod, the rural and small town missions. They brought in a whole van load of stuff that came down, and we were able to utilize those things and help those things as well. Simple things of being able to provide diapers or garbage bags or tarps, all those kind of things were absolutely amazing in there. And so we now have a new beginning, and we have a new normal. And one of the tree stumps that came down reminded me of the root of Jesse's stump, that out of that dead stump that was laying next to the side, a new tree started growing. And I think we're reminded of, though we are dead to our sins, we are alive in Jesus. And our community is rebuilding. We are strong. We have pulled together in ways that I don't think our community had been pulled together before. But it really has been amazing to be the hands and the feet of Jesus to so many who never knew the hands and the feet of Jesus before, because they were just doing what they did and lived their own life. And for us to be able to help others in such a powerful way, it wasn't by our might, it wasn't by our strength, it wasn't by our doing, but it was by the generosity of those around Synod. It was by the prayers of people around Synod that gave us strength. It was by the random messages that I would get on my cell phone, or the voicemails that would be left, or the cards that we got in the mail that said, "We are praying for you, and just know that your brothers and sisters at such and such church in who knows where, North Dakota, was remembering you in prayer." And that meant the world to us. So we have the opportunity as a Synod to be very rejoicing that in times of need we are able to come together and help each other. And I think especially in a small community like Havelock is not a great metropolitan, but even in our community, a lot of people were like, "Wow, we don't know what to do. We just don't know what to do." And so the county commissioner looked to the church, and this was having a very good working relationship within the community, through my work with the chamber and as a chaplain, and knowing some of the peoples that are in different elected positions. Having those working relationships opened up many opportunities for our church to be best suited and poised to be able to help others, because there was that connection there. So my encouragement is, as churches in small towns, get to know your elected officials, get to know your police chief, your fire chief, get to know the people who work in the emergency communication center, and remember them in prayer, and create the relationship, because working together, we were able to help out our community in a way that hopefully we don't have to see anytime soon at all. So with that, I open up if there's any questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Pastor Daub. What a fantastic insight you've given us into not only the heart of a disaster, but also the heart that comes from having to deal with something like that. As we look at being the hands and feet of Christ and delivering that good news, what a great way that you had that connection there. Folks, if you have any questions for Pastor Daub, please type them into the attendee chat feature there. Otherwise, we'd love to get to those. Just something, and what you don't know is I learned something before we ever started today, and now I've learned so many more things. But one, I couldn't help. I was laughing in my office by myself. I thought it was very interesting that the shed that was built by or the shelter that was built by the Eagle Scout stood, and the one built by the city was down. I don't know why that struck me as so funny.
There was some great irony to that, because the Eagle Scouts wanted to have built a third picnic structure, and the city fathers said no. They put the kibosh on that, the city manager, and so after the storm, I said, as an Eagle Scout, how do you think our construction fares now? And I didn't quite get a good answer. So, but.
Well, at least you got to throw it out there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
As an old football coach, and this is an old saying that's gone around. One of the best defense is a good offense. I really appreciate the fact that you had mentioned, so much. I talked to different people who have weathered different storms and different types of storms, and so often they get caught kind of unaware, like you said, people that don't plan ahead and are ready. I very much appreciate the fact that you mentioned getting to know the folks who are involved in disaster relief in the community, and those the leaders of the community, so that bridges those gaps. Had you had any work with LCMS disaster relief ahead of time, or any contact with them? And if so, or if not, what would your recommendation be to connect with that on the forefront to be preventative?
In terms of having to deal with LCMS, we've never had a disaster here. We've never had something that I've needed to ever need help from. Our congregation has been blessed in many ways that we have always been able to help others. And so for us to be on the receiving end was a very weird and new experience, even for some of our founding members. They're like, Pastor, we're not used to receiving. And, but I think one of the things I would encourage every congregation, no matter the size and no matter the district, first of all, contact your district, because every district has a district coordinator with regards to disaster relief of one way or another, or they know someone who can help in those areas. But also contact the Synod, because it is amazing the plethora of resources that they have that are available that will give you some guidance. Like, okay, we live in Tornado Alley. So what are some things that we should do? Well, maybe we should have a storm trailer ready that has disaster response supplies. Well, what kind of things do we need in a trailer? What kind of things should we have with that? And so I think that would be my encouragement, is contact the LCMS disaster relief board. They have tons of stuff. And one of the things that we're going to be doing this year, and primarily I'm doing it purposefully almost 2 years out, is they have an entire vacation Bible school entitled Camp Courage. And the Camp Courage program is for congregations or communities that have gone through a natural disaster. And one of the things that they have in there is the entire program is available to the congregation for free. All of your materials, all of your supplies, all of the things, everything is provided and sent to the congregation as part of different grants that are made available to each of the this program is provided free of charge, so that you can invite all the congregation or the children in the community and things like that. And so kind of as we get ready to get ready for 2 years out, is my idea is to kind of bring this Camp Courage thing to help get kids ready, so that when people start talking about Hurricane Florence and stuff again, they have fresh in their mind the connection of the gospel with regards to the connection of the gospel with regards to, okay, that was the storm, but we have Jesus who enables us to be courageous in the midst of the storm. But I think on the LCMS website, they have, I think there's a pull down thing for disaster relief, and they have some of the connections, I think, through there. LCF was also a fantastic partner. Ross and Michael came here to Havelock to visit, and not only for us, but also to the church in Jacksonville, the church in Wilmington. They had a stack of prepaid Visa cards that were given to them from LCF as a gift to give to people in need, so that as pastor were going out into the community and knew someone in need, I could give them that gift card, and they could go to Walmart or they could go to the grocery store and they could get the supplies that they needed without me having to try to get my treasurer to write a check and all that kind of stuff. So they were an amazing partner in there and an amazing support.
Excellent. That actually, you've addressed the three questions subsequent that I had for you. So fantastic. That's awesome. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll let Pastor go. Just a reminder: this webinar will be archived, so the link to the archive will be up if you'd like to use this presentation with other groups, perhaps even to start your own disaster relief readiness group or the alert team, the Lutheran early response teams, which Pastor alluded to there, some of that training that can be done. And I think I'm so excited to hear that you're using that VBS kind of in hindsight. Like you said, there's an awful lot of, you said even some PTSD with some of your folks still today, a couple years afterwards, and to reach out to them, but especially those kids. What a fantastic resource for them and outreach into your community from your congregation. I'm so excited to hear that. I'd love to hear a complete aside, but I'd love to hear how that goes after you do that. So let's stay in touch on that. Folks, I don't see any other questions. If you do want some more disaster relief information, like Pastor said, you can go to the lcms.org website, and there is a drop down there for you to use to get those resources. Again, Pastor, thank you so much, not only for the excellent information that you've given us today, but for all your hard work there in Havelock, and for the blessing that you've been, again, being the hands and feet of Christ there in that place to share the good news and connect folks to his word and to the fact that even in the midst of disaster, we know we have Christ's gift, and what a gift that is. And so thank you so much, folks, for being on today. A couple of webinars coming up. You can check those out. I'm getting stuck here on my computer. Here, the next one is on domestic abuse in rural and small town setting, what we can do to reach out to folks. That's by Deaconess Dr. Kim Shave, Director of Humanitry in St. Louis. She'll be talking about that. She has put together some excellent resources to reach out to those who have been affected by domestic abuse. Then let's see, that is on March 12th. On April 23rd, we have a webinar on Revitality, the new resource for self-evaluation for congregations. That's going to be presented by Reverend Dr. Mark Wood, Director of LCMS Witness and Outreach and LCMS Revitalization. That's coming up on April 23rd. And very soon, registration will be open for the next Making Disciples for Life conference, which is scheduled for April 16th through the 18th at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I think that's all I have by way of announcements. Again, thank you, Pastor Daub. Thank you all for joining us. God's blessings to you all.
Take care. Thank you.